The scripture lesson for this morning comes from Matthew chapter 2. It's the time of year to read Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 15. And I'll be reading from the New International Version, which sounds the best for the spoken word. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who was born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem, in Judea," they replied. "For this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, you are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He then sent to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose overhead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary. They bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said. "Take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up and took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." May God add his blessing to the reading of the gospel. You know, what if we had no other account of Jesus' birth but Matthew's? What if we didn't have Luke at all? How would we understand our beloved holidays, and how would our traditions change? If Matthew was all we had, the nativity scenes that we display, you probably have some in your house, they're in the narthex and in the office. The nativity scenes that we display would be quite different. We would keep the angel, only now the angel would be in a scene with nobody else but a sleeping Joseph. Does he look like he's sleeping? There it is. Because the angel visitation in Matthew is just in a dream. Whether you're a wise man or you're Joseph, nobody else, no conversation. Mary says to the angel, because she's awake, "How can this be?" Nobody gets to talk to the angel. They're all asleep. They're just told what to do. Mary would be there in your nativity scene, but she's kind of in the background. In Matthew's gospel, she doesn't speak. She's only mentioned in the whole of the 2 chapters 5 times. Joseph's name appears 9 times in the same space. Mary has much less agency and may not be included if we didn't have Luke. Also, no stable, no manger, no hay, none of that. No shepherds. In fact, much of the action in Luke's story takes place indoors when people are sleeping. Everything that is, except the one thing that Luke doesn't have: the star. The star. The star appears in Matthew's gospel. The wise men came to a house, not a stable, a house, and found Mary and Jesus. Where was Joseph? He could have been there, but who knows? It doesn't say he was there. He was probably sleeping somewhere, getting another dream. He gets 4 in this story. The other people who were visited in a dream besides Joseph, there were 5 visitations. The 5th one, or the middle one, were the wise men. Okay. Now, I know you know that, some of you, that's your favorite song. God bless you. They're not kings. Oh, we 3 kings. They're not kings. They're wise men, scholars, astrologers, magi. And while we're on the subject of the wise men, they're only in Matthew's gospel. And everyone says that there were 3, but there's just 3 gifts. There will probably at least 2, most likely less than 30. But there are 3 gifts, so we always think there's 3 wise men in our nativity scene. But without shepherds and animals and stuff, you could put a lot more wise men in there if you wanted to. And then there's this guy. This is a guy you have to add into your nativity if Matthew is your only gospel. It's Herod the Great. And who wants him in your nativity scene? He's conniving, he's conspiring, he's all around slimy. That's not from the commentaries, that's my own. And then he does the unforgivable. If we add Herod to the scene, this is Herod here for the manger scene, or the nativity scene. Sorry, no manger. We have to add the slaughtered toddlers and infants, because that's what Herod represents in Matthew's gospel. The slaughtered children, or maybe just an image of Rachel weeping for her children. She will not be consoled because they are no more. This was a harder figurine to find. This we would have to add into our nativity if Matthew was our only gospel. The slaughter of innocents is this huge, huge thing that happens in Matthew. But we focus on the wise men because it's not as scary and bloody and depressing. And again, more of the action in Matthew's gospel surrounds Joseph. He, being warned in a dream, again, saves his family, saves his newborn child, and escapes to Egypt. He gets this warning from the angel 4 times in dreams. Jesus' birth in the Gospel of Matthew is fraught with violence and the threat of violence. It's stressful. It's anxious. It's not calm and bright. Is it any wonder that the land where all of these things are said to have taken place is fraught with violence? Since the early 20th century, there's been conflict between Palestinians and Israelis living in this small section of the world. It's a conflict that's gone on for decades. I think a lot of people believe the conflict is ancient, that it goes back to biblical times. But it can't be further from the truth. In fact, the conflicts in this country that we have and deal with in our young country have been going on for longer than this conflict of this Palestinian-Israeli. In a very real sense, it's a conflict of maternity. I said modernity. It sounded like maternity. It's a conflict of modernity. It started after the First World War when European powers came to the Middle East to conquer and colonize, and they decided how they were going to divide it up. The population of Jews increased exponentially during the diaspora, and then there was a considerable influx, of course, during the time of and after the Second World War, for obvious reasons. Then the UN intervenes in the territory and creates established states. After that, there are 2 wars in which Israelis won both wars and claimed more territory in the region by force. And after suicide bombers and military retaliation, and back and forth until this day, it makes you want to put your head in the sand. But how is that helpful? How is it helpful to put your head in the sand? It's the same as leaving Herod and Rachel weeping out of our nativity. We don't want to see that. We don't want to look. We don't want to be around it. It's the same reason why we evade our friends who are suffering in serious grief and hard times. It's the same reason our culture outsources all things to do with death and dying, even though it's the most natural thing in the world, because, friends, we all do it. How is it helpful to put our head in the sand and leave out the yucky parts? If we want peace in the world, we can't have these volatile regions sitting on the burner, constantly at the risk of boiling over. Peace on earth means peace in every place on earth. We need a way to make space in our hearts for the people who live in these regions and not forget about it. Not just sweep it under the rug or tuck our head into the sand. Maybe for the work of peace, if you'll excuse an expression from Rhett Butler, we could just give a damn. And if compassion for people who live day in and day out and decade after decade with conflict, with occupation and aggression and conquering and threats and homemade bombs and airstrikes and back and forth until no one is innocent. No one is innocent, and even so, it's really no one's fault. If compassion for the Israelis and the Palestinians living day to day, what if that could move us to peace? Christians live in Palestine. We saw the video earlier. They celebrate Christmas, and they should, because they're ancient Christians. The conflict may not be that old, but their Christianity is. It's really old. And Christians living in Palestine are on one side of the conflict, friends. They are. They are not neutral. They are Palestinians. But they have Christmas trees and Christmas songs. And of course, the holy sites are right there. And many Christians make pilgrimages to Bethlehem every year. But in my personal devotional time, and I don't know about you, maybe you're dialed in better than I am, but my personal devotional time, when I think about Bethlehem this time of year, I don't ever think about current Bethlehem. Do you? Sure. I think about first century Bethlehem. But it doesn't occur to me that people live and work and go to school in the same town where Jesus was born. They still do. But this year, that's going to change. I'm going to try to make space in my heart to think about people living in the Bethlehem of today, because the conditions weren't that different. The Romans occupied the territory that Jesus was born into. And Herod, making out to kill him, was not, he was a puppet for the Romans. He wasn't even the central person of the occupation. He was just the current king of the Jews. And when someone says to him, hey, We've seen the star. Who is born the King of the Jews? Herod goes, what? No, no, no. He'd already killed people in his family, mind you, that keep them from usurping him in his position. So he's definitely going out for this guy with the star when these wise people with all these rich gifts come up. He was not a good guy. But we need him. We need him in our nativity. I'll think about Bethlehem this year. Peace starts with you and me. It starts with us. And peace is more than refraining from conflict and staying out of it. We make peace. Peace is active. It takes you and me changing how we think, making space in our mind and our heart for the plight of others. And what can we do to make peace? I don't know, but I think we can start by learning from others who have responded to the war with pleas for peace. By using their influence, by using their art, by using their creativity to say something about how we need peace. This morning, you heard a beautiful expression of an artist in this country who wrote a song as a call for peace. Now, do you hear what I hear? Who among you, and I probably can't see you because the lights are too bright, who among you is that your favorite song? It's not mine, so I'll put my hand down. So we got a couple people. That's your favorite Christmas song. Do you hear what I hear? This song was written during a time of national anguish and fear. Noel Regney and Gloria Shane are songwriters. They're also a married couple. They wrote the song in the fall of 1962 under the threat of nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, I read and researched a little bit about this, and they seem to kind of distance themselves from the Christmas story. And they said, you know, we really wanted to write a song about peace. We really didn't mean it for it be, you know, we thought it would be a Christmas song, it would be released in Christmas. But we didn't really mean for it to be like a religious song, you know. And of course it has religious images. A child shivers in the cold, let us bring him silver and gold. That's from the scriptures. That's from this one, Matthew, actually. And I was curious about that. And they didn't say anything about how they wanted to distance themselves from, and even in 1962, distance themselves from that. But I would imagine it might have something to do with the way we practice Christianity sometimes in this country. Because essentially, this call for peace and the song, Do You Hear What I Hear, is about a conversation. Do you hear what I hear? It's a way to introduce yourself to a stranger because you're experiencing a common event, right? And then we can spread that message of peace to this person and that person. Do you hear what I hear? It's not a, you listen to this and I'm going to tell you exactly how it is and how it's going to be. It's an invitation for a conversation, rather. And I think maybe their experience of the Christian church was more like, open your mouth, I'll give you the religion with a spoon. So they distanced themselves as songwriters from the idea that they wrote this religious song because, of course, they might be criticized by who knows who, and there's other things going on. But the way we practice Christianity sometimes makes people bad taste in their mouth. And so people calling for peace during the Cuban Missile Crisis write this song, Do You Hear What I Hear? Pray for peace. People everywhere. Pray for peace. People everywhere. You know, in our country, when this song was released as a single for that Christmas, the country had experienced this in the fall of 62. And by November 20th, that crisis had quelled and quieted. But we all know what happened the next November in our nation in 63. U.S. president was assassinated, and we are certainly, in this day and age, no stranger to a couple of years in a row of rough time. In fact, I think we skip over it sometimes. We think of it as being last year, but it was 2 years, the pandemic. And to me, and it was worldwide too, that was the other thing. To me, the song, though, is this invitation to have a commonality with people around you. You're experiencing the same thing. Do you hear that? Do you hear what I hear? Do you think we should have peace too? How are we going to do that? Talk about peace. Dare to hope for peace. Do you hear what I hear?